Hello and welcome to the Nerdiest podcast, the show where nerds talk about nerdy things. I'm your host, Mr. Nick Barrett, and as always, well actually not as always because Jackson's not here, I'm joined by two special guests, AndresRestart and NishquikPops, and today we are going to be doing a full spoiler dive on The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. That's right, full spoiler. So if you have not finished the story or you just don't want to know anything about the game, this is not the podcast for you. But if you have finished it, then you can listen and enjoy us talking all about spoilers. So with that spoiler warning out of the way, I want to go ahead and introduce our guests. AndresRestart, NishquikPops. How are you guys doing? Take the floor. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm doing well. I have been playing Tears of the Kingdom recently. Still playing it. Kind of go back and forth, trying to 100% it. But yeah, I'm doing well. I'm ready to still talk about Tears of the Kingdom because it's always a good time.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I'm kind of the opposite. I haven't played the game since like the heat of summer, like June, July. I haven't played it since then. And now we're like late September. It's been a while since I played it, but yesterday I was actually thinking, I was like talking to some friends and I was like, guys, I can't believe I spent over 140 hours in that game in a span of just like 2 months. It's just shocking that I spent so much time in that one game in such a short amount of time, but it was all worth it. It was all worth it. I'm excited to talk more about it today because, like I was telling you before the podcast, I've been talking about this game so much over this entire year, so it's just gonna be like free flow talking about Zelda and one of the best games of the year.
Yeah,
but I'm gonna be very critical about it because
one of
yeah.
Oh,
This has been a fantastic year for gaming, I will say.
I don't think I can listen to this guy anymore.
No, yeah, I love the game. It's still probably my game of the year, but as the months have gone on, I have started to realize what it could have done better. And in like not like in a bad way, but just like I want this for the future Zelda games, or I wanted this for Tears of the Kingdom, but like what we got is still fantastic. So I'm excited to talk about a little bit about that today.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that I think when it comes to Zelda, we tend to be hypercritical.
Yeah.
Like we're way more forgiving for like pretty much every other game franchise. When it comes to Zelda, if it's not perfect, it's a problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I kind of see where you're coming from. We just expect the best from Zelda.
Yeah. I'm also comparing it to other games I've recently played or other games that I'm playing right now or like in recent memory. But I will say this, and I've told this to other people who I've like talked about with Tears of the Kingdom and stuff. This is without a doubt, and I even knew this on the first week that I played the game, it is without a doubt my favorite open world game that I've ever played, and the best open world game I've ever played. So like in that area, it just knocked it out of the park.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was playing Tears of the Kingdom like last week, and then I stopped, and I've been playing Minecraft all week actually.
Interesting.
Getting back into it on Java Edition. I just kind of hit my stride with a world, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go for it. But before that, I was playing Tears of the Kingdom, going through, doing a bunch of side quests. I want to finish all the shrines. I'm taking up the arduous task of getting enough Korok seeds to max out my inventory and then stop there.
Okay. So you haven't done all the shrines yet. So you haven't seen I mean, we can talk about like shrine stuff later, but
I'm assuming he knows what.
Yeah, I've seen the reward. I know what it is.
Yes.
I just haven't gotten it in game yet.
Yeah, it's the same for me. So
yeah,
I haven't gotten all the shrines yet, but I know what you get.
For me, I have done all the shrines, all the light routes, all the towers, all the main quests. I've done majority of the side adventures, and I have done a very small handful of Korok seeds. So I've done basically everything except for most of the Korok seeds because I wanted to get through as much of that game as I could because I have a gigantic backlog of other games and then other games I wanted to play releasing this year. So yeah, I will eventually maybe... Will I go back to Tears of the Kingdom? That is entirely dependent on if they have a next-gen version of it, but we can talk about that later as well. I really hope that there is. Yeah,
I'm sure we'll somehow end up talking about Switch 2 towards the end. It'll just come up. It'll just happen.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, I've been doing that a lot. I've been using a guide because I bought like the hardcover collector's edition guide, and I'm like, if I'm gonna look up shrines, I'm gonna use a guide. So
Yeah.
and I'm gonna do it the old-fashioned way, where you have to flip through the pages and actually look for it to find it.
What I did for shrines is I got a lot of light routes in the underground, and I would just flip up and down on the map to see which light route locations correspond with the shrines and which ones I'm missing. So I kept doing that, but then the last two were so hard to find because I had to zoom in so close and I couldn't see them. And then there was one in Hyrule Castle. It was a light route, which corresponded to a shrine somewhere in the Hyrule Castle area. And I could not find the light route for the life of me until I realized that there's like this small like pond area, and there's like this small little like crevice like cave you go into, and there's like a tiny chasm that you can fall into, like a really small chasm. You fall in there, and it is like a very sectioned off place in the depths where you find this light route. And I was like, that is the most difficult light route I ever had to find in the game.
I might have found that one already. I might not have to worry about that.
Yeah, that was literally the last light route I needed in the depths, and I was like, I have no idea how to find this. But yeah.
I have not done all the light routes. I'm so close. I have like all of them except for a section in the bottom right and a section in the top left. Like, aside from those two sections, I'm good. So I just need to actually go down there. And while I'm down there, I need to find enough Zonite so that I can finish upgrading my batteries. I think I need...
So, I will give you this tip. Do you know that Swirl Island where you see the last memory of Zelda?
Yeah.
It's like that Swirl Island. If you go into that area in the depths, that is the best Zonite farming location in the game for me, because I found that area, and from the start of that like swirl till the very end of the swirl, I got like at least 200 Zonite, and I broke like 3 rock boulder weapons. But yeah,
it's so funny to see how my inventory changes going from like sky and surface to the depths, because it goes from like, oh, I have all these weapons for fighting enemies, to 90% of my inventory is just sticks with rocks fused to them so I can break the Zonite, and that's it.
Yeah, once you get the Master Sword, I use that, and since it recharges, like I'll attach a rock to it, and
Master Sword is my rock fusion thing.
Once you get the Master Sword, like I always have too many weapons. I never run out, I did max out on my my energy cells, so now I can basically fly forever. That's how it feels. Like there's early on when you're playing the game, you're the lack of battery kind of makes it feel like you see those islands high up and you're like, oh, that's a challenge. But now it's like, okay, I'm just gonna pop up my air bike and just fly there. That's another thing. I think like if you don't know about the air bike, the game is a lot harder. But once you know how to make the air bike, everything is cake. Like it's just so much easier.
I made an air bike, but I didn't think to use like the spike to hold up the like the steering stick. And I just tried to put it together on the ground, and while I was doing that, I kind of put it together like sideways. So now whenever I fly it, I have like this weird inclination to lean left.
Yeah,
which makes it very hard to fly. So
so it's not good.
One day I'll make a better one, but until then I'm fine as it.
You know whose air bike guide I used to build the best air bike?
Was it mine?
Yes, it was yours.
Oh, okay.
Yes. I was like, I'll have to have it at this angle, at this 90-degree angle, and flip it this way. And
I didn't use a spike.
Yeah. But yeah, it was. I didn't use Ultra Hand to create a lot of machines as much as I thought I would. But I realized that like I was seeing a lot of people, like Andres had some interesting creations. Ratatoskr had a very interesting creation where he made a unicycle and I was like, I need to make that unicycle. It's so cool. And it's actually really good if you don't have a horse nearby and you just summon that unicycle and you just go. So I made a few things like that. And I liked whenever you're just like around in the overworld and you see random like parts and you're just like, oh, I can build this together and see what happens. Because a lot of people's complaint for this game was, oh, I didn't like the building, I don't like building vehicles, I don't like the vehicles, I don't like that. And I'm like, you don't have to do any of that. I didn't, like, majority of the time I played the game, I wasn't building vehicles. And I only built it if I needed to, or if I wanted to, and the want was like very little. Most of the time I was just running around and using Ascend, but the option for that to be available and the fact that that was there in the game is just, it's crazy. It's amazing. And I think a lot of people kind of miss the point of that. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, because a lot of people were like, oh, I don't like the vehicles, I don't like driving in a Zelda game, I don't like making cars, I don't like making trucks and mechs. And I was like, first of all, you don't have to. Second of all, think about how cool it is, the fact that you're doing that. Third of all, like, it's not really forcing a lot of this stuff onto you. Like, unless it's in the shrine and you have to like make an Ultra Hand contraption in the shrine or in a temple. I think Ultra Hand was very heavily enforced in this game, but it wasn't like a heavy-handed, like, you have to use Ultra Hand for everything, you know?
Right. It's very interesting how optional some of this stuff actually was. Because to your point, like, you can ride around and see all of these different materials and know that you can build with them, but you don't have to. And I think that leans into the kind of like play your way or use your imagination aspect that the developers wanted to get across. Because it's like, if you want to build this super intricate tank that can act like absolutely destroy a Hinox in 2 seconds, go for it. But if you want to just ride your horse and fight the Hinox with the Master Sword, you can do that too. And neither way is the quote-unquote correct way to play the game. There is no correct way to play.
There's no correct way, and that is something I also had to get used to, because like, this is one of the first, outside of Breath of the Wild, is one of the first games that was that like hands off in a way, where it's like, figure it out yourself, do things yourself, we're not going to tell you what to do. And I like that with Breath of the Wild. This took it a step further, which was very interesting, and I think it alienated a lot of people, but brought in the people who enjoyed that from Breath of the Wild even more. So yeah, what were you saying, Andres?
I'd argue that there is a wrong way to play.
When
you get off the Great Sky Island and you don't go to Lookout Landing and you don't get the paraglider, the game is broken.
You know what's funny is, I don't remember who it was. I think it was Nintentalk or Botox Media or someone. They were saying that when they started the game, when they got off the Great Sky Island, they didn't go to Lookout Landing first. They went to the Great Plateau because they wanted to see what's new in the Great Plateau. And they were getting absolutely demolished, and they're like, wait, I still don't have the paraglider. This game is so difficult. And I'm gonna be honest, this is very embarrassing. I spent like 4 hours on the Great Sky Island because I thought it was very difficult. And the reason I thought it was difficult is every time I would fail and I would fall, I was like, I wish I had the paraglider. I wish I had the paraglider right now. I wish I had this ability. I wish I had that ability. But that made it all the more like challenging and interesting. So yeah, I can, like, there are a lot of ways you can make the game more difficult for yourself. I totally agree with that.
I mean, it would be, it's a fun challenge to play without the paraglider, but like, if you're just kind of like a casual Zelda player, or you know, you're jumping into the game, if you don't get the paraglider, you're in a world of trouble.
Like, you know what's funny?
I'm not even sure if it's, I mean, I bet it is possible to beat the entire game without the paraglider, but it's got to be ridiculously hard to do so. Like,
you know what's funny?
Just diving down, like, how do you survive without the paraglider? Like, how do you land?
How do you, reduce your fall damage and all that,
You just take damage, right? You just dive down, and, I mean, if you have a fairy, you can probably, you'll just be revived.
That's probably the answer. is just have a bunch of fairies and hope that you don't run out.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's like way you could like bounce, like if you use like a balloon or something.
Have you heard that the speedrunners who speedrun the game, you know, like in Hyrule Castle, if you go down there, you have to do the boss gauntlet, right?
Yeah.
Since they don't have the paraglider, they have to defeat Colgera before, like, they start in the air and they have to beat him before they land down on the ground.
Ooh.
Because they don't have the paraglider.
See, that sounds
like
difficult.
yeah, the updraft is like keeping them up in the air, and maybe they have like rocket shields or something, right? But they can't fall or else they'll die in the Colgera fight.
Man.
Yeah.
I mean, can you even use a rocket shield without landing?
Not without landing, no, because you can't pull out a shield.
Yeah.
You need a
Then I don't know
foothold.
how they stay airborne, but I've heard a lot of people like say that that's how they had to beat Colgera, or like that's how speedrunners had to beat Colgera in the boss gauntlet. So I want to see footage of that.
I think you can. I think you can summon Zonai devices while you're in the air.
Yes.
So I think in theory you can land on the glider, and that can give you
Yes.
a foothold.
Yeah.
So that might be. You're going to need to get a lot of gliders, especially since they despawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the midair glider spawn is a very, or the midair glider summon is a very difficult technique. I had to really practice that quite a bit.
You know, as we're talking about this, like it's kind of reminding me of something you mentioned earlier. It just kind of got me thinking on, so for example, I'm playing through Tears of the Kingdom now, and I do kind of like wrestle with, is this the best game ever? Is this better than Breath of the Wild? I don't know. It's a good game. All I know is it's a good game. Like that's all I can decide. I'm enjoying the game. I really don't want to rank it. Like that's just kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
But you know, when it comes to Breath of the Wild, shortly before Tears of the Kingdom's release, I decided finally that Breath of the Wild was my favorite game. And I wrestled with the idea for years. I was like, oh, I don't know, Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, Wind Waker, I wrestled with it for years.
Yeah.
But that part of the problem with me with Breath of the Wild is that my first playthrough of it was amazing, you know, from beginning to end. There's some minor gripes, right? Like I wish the final fight was a little bit more climactic, but overall, you know, Breath of the Wild was amazing. It was a masterpiece. But whenever I would go back, and I'd go back a lot for different reasons, to either make a theory video, record footage, or like just to start it from scratch again. Like I did it several times.
Yeah.
And every time I did, I would enjoy it. Like even if it was just to run around for a few minutes, it was just fun to just kind of play around, run around Hyrule Field. It's just fun playing Breath of the Wild. Even if you're not doing anything, it's just fun. But I noticed that every time I went back to Breath of the Wild after my first run, I never felt compelled to go all the way to the end. So I was wondering, is Breath of the Wild not as replayable as I'd like it to be, right? Because if I want Breath of the Wild to be like the best game ever, I feel like it should be something I can go back and play from beginning to end. That's kind of what I thought. But then as we approached Tears of the Kingdom, I made a concerted effort to do Master Mode and go from beginning to end. And that was kind of like a stream I did, right? It was like a series I did leading up to release. And what was fun for me is I did Master Mode, and it started off as a 3-heart challenge at the same time. So it was like extra challenging, but it was extra fun. Like I was enjoying the game a lot. And I was going through a lot of these story sequences again. And that experience for me kind of cemented Breath of the Wild as like my go-to favorite game.
Yeah.
Before Tears of the Kingdom came out.
Okay.
But it took me years to get to that point.
Yeah.
So, you know, I look at Tears of the Kingdom, right? And we're kind of talking about how there's these different ways to play the game, which is kind of like how Breath of the Wild was, right? Like you can play through Breath of the Wild in one way, and that's fine, but you can think of different ways to play and experience Breath of the Wild. You can make Breath of the Wild a harder game. You can make Breath of the Wild an easier game. There's all sorts of ways you can go about playing and experiencing the game. And the truth is the same can be said for Tears of the Kingdom. And it's kind of interesting, right? Because Tears of the Kingdom is such a huge game. There's so much you can do. It's definitely bigger than Breath of the Wild by a sizable margin in terms of the amount of things there are to do. But we're kind of complaining because there's no DLC, right? Like I want a DLC. I wanted a Master Mode. That's really been confirmed now twice that there are currently no plans. What that means exactly, I don't know. Maybe there's still a Master Mode, but Yeah, I don't know, but I guess the main
it's
point I'm
interesting-
making here, just to finish my point, is just that
sorry. Yeah.
there's so much we can do with Tears of the Kingdom. Like I can go back and do a 3-heart challenge, or I can go back and be like, you know what? Let's play the entire game without the paraglider. Let's see what happens, because there's so many options we do have in the game that we can kind of reinvent Tears of the Kingdom for ourselves. So I'm kind of curious, like how I'm going to experience this game 2-3 years from now, and how I'll feel about it then.
Yeah, because like you're saying that your master mode run kind of cemented Breath of the Wild as your number one favorite game, right? Basically, right? So yeah, it's interesting. I really hope Tears of the Kingdom at least gets a master mode, because I can see myself coming back to this game, but I don't know if it's gonna be the same way as like, doing a 3-heart run, or using like I've seen what's his name, Point Crow doing like only a meat fusion run, like only fusing meat to his weapons. I don't see myself doing things like that, but I see myself like whenever like a friend comes over, if I take my Switch to a friend's place, I'm like, hey, look, this is Tears of the Kingdom, look at all the cool stuff I can do. I see myself doing things like that. But if there was something like master mode, if there was something like additional things to do, I would like get back into it. But I do agree that there's a lot of ways to play this game. There's a lot of ways to replay the game. There's a lot of new things that you can always try in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. They're basically endless experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think a point that's very interesting is, Andres, you mentioned Breath of the Wild and how every time you'd replay it, you never felt like you wanted to get to the end. And on the topic of replayability, I think for me personally, I don't know if I'll ever, and I mean I probably will some point in the future, but I don't know if Tears of the Kingdom is the kind of game where I'm gonna want to start over, just because there's so much in it. Like as I was playing it, I was like, do I really want to find all of the towers again and go through all of the depths again? Whereas Breath of the Wild was like, it was just the one level where it's like, okay, get all the shrines, get all the towers, do the divine beasts.
Yeah.
But there's just so much more in Tears of the Kingdom that it doesn't make me want to do it again. It's like, I'll do it once and just continually grind away at my one save file. And, maybe sometime in the future, I do open up another file and say, okay, let's do a 3-heart run, no paraglider, throw a fun challenge on it. But
you're not going to do every single story sequence, right? Like,
right.
And to be clear, like, getting to the end is fine. Like, the end is fine. It's just doing all the other things you would do for a normal run again, that it, as you're saying, kind of feel a little bit tedious after the first go around.
Exactly. Like when I did my master mode run of Breath of the Wild before Tears of the Kingdom came out, I literally just did story stuff, and I hit some shrines on the way just to get like somewhat full stamina, and that was it. And I didn't feel like, oh, let's go find all the armor, let's do all the shrines, let's do all the towers.
Did you get the Master Sword?
Yes, but
okay,
only because I cheesed it and like did the campfire trick right next to it and did that, and that was easy.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, if you like place wood right next to it and set it on fire, and then go to like there's a certain angle, and you go to sleep, and then when you wake up, you just mash A and hope you can get it. And if you don't, you do it again. Yeah,
that's
I did that during my final run.
Wow, I never see like what I love about Breath of the Wild is 7 years later we're still figuring out things about the game.
I know, right?
And I know that'll happen with Tears of the Kingdom. People are like, oh, no one's talking about Tears of the Kingdom anymore. I'm like, just wait. Like another 3 years, it's gonna have a spike. People are gonna continue talking about it. People are gonna continue discovering things, finding things, building things, creating things. Like
people are still talking about Tears of the Kingdom. I think that's an exaggeration.
It is an exaggeration, but I also think that they are right in a way that this year has just been absolutely insane for video games. Like, it didn't really hit me in the beginning of the year how big of a year this is. And I think that's something we'll talk about later, but like Zelda has made a very, 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 very massive impact on like the gaming industry and gaming discussion and news and general like audiences this year, but so has other games. So I wouldn't say other games have like overtaken Zelda's popularity, but I think it's not as clear cut.
Is Tears of the Kingdom as impactful as Breath of the Wild?
No, that is what I was about to say that I don't think Tears of the Kingdom's impact right now, or I don't think Tears of the Kingdom is dominating the conversation as much as Breath of the Wild did in 2017. As much as I remember it.
So I'll say that it's easy to say that now, right? But if we go back to 2017, and obviously memory is a fickle thing.
Yeah.
But I remember going into the Game Awards and being like, Mario Odyssey is selling really well. And
really?
Mario Odyssey actually outsold Breath of the Wild.
Mm-hmm.
For a while. Breath of the Wild has kind of had that lasting power, so it's overtaken Mario Odyssey again. But Breath of the Wild did really well, but then Mario Odyssey came out, outsold it, and also was higher on the Metacritic scores for a little while too.
It was Mario Odyssey was the highest rated game on OpenCritic until Elden Ring, I think.
Yeah, so my point is that going into like the Game Awards for the Game of the Year award, Mario Odyssey, like there was reason to think that Mario Odyssey was going to beat Breath of the Wild. It didn't, and I think that was the right choice because Breath of the Wild was a more innovative, revolutionary game, right? Like Breath of the Wild changed kind of how we perceive open world games. Mario Odyssey was just like, still like a big deal, like, oh, so you can make a good 3D platformer. Awesome. But, you know, it was, Breath of the Wild definitely has left a bigger footprint on the industry, and now you see that Breath of the Wild has continued to do well. Mario Odyssey has done well, but Breath of the Wild has kind of elevated itself. So my main point is simply that in 2017, though, we weren't super certain that Breath of the Wild was going to reign MVP across the board, right? There was definitely some discussion, and now this year, there's definitely some discussion, right? You got Baldur's Gate. It ain't Starfield, that's for sure. No. Not saying Starfield's bad, but it's definitely not. It's not in that tier, you know.
Yeah.
So
I will say this. I don't know if you guys watch Kit and Krista's podcast, but last year when they were talking about the Game Awards, they were talking about how involved they were in the 2017 Game Awards with Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey and all that. And one very interesting thing is they were talking about how all the Nintendo employees were very scared that Breath of the Wild wasn't going to win and that Horizon Zero Dawn would win. And I thought the same thing back in 2017. I was like, oh, this Sony game is gonna win because like I still think that this is just a whole nother topic, but I think Western media and Western like gaming journalism has a very like has a bias towards games, like a certain kind of games. That's all.
Absolutely.
So I was like, oh, Horizon Zero Dawn is winning. Breath of the Wild is a better game. Horizon Zero Dawn will win, and it's gonna be whatever. So I didn't even watch the Game Awards. I was like, oh, whatever. It's gonna be a like I don't.
That would
have
been such Zelda a travesty of justice. Not to say Horizon's a bad game, but like it's just two different tiers.
I
like
know.
Horizon's a great game, but Breath of the Wild is Breath of the Wild is a GOAT. So
I know, and when I saw that Breath of the Wild won, I was genuinely surprised. I was like, a Nintendo game won Game of the Year? This is insane. And like, are we gonna continue talking about Game of the Year, or are we gonna save that for a little later?
I mean, we're already here. We might as well.
Okay. I will say this. Ever since the beginning of this year, I kept telling people, I want Tears of the Kingdom to win. I want Tears of the Kingdom to win, but I don't think it's a lock for Game of the Year. And everyone's like, oh, but it's Zelda. It'll win. It'll win. I was like, yes, I want it to win. I think it might win. I think it will win, but I don't think it's a lock. And even after Zelda launched, I was like, oh, wait, yeah, I think it's a lock. I actually think it'll win. But I think the big competitor right now is Baldur's Gate 3, and I actually really do probably see Baldur's Gate winning over Tears of the Kingdom. And if it does, that's fine, but like that's an entirely different discussion for another time, I guess. But like that just shows how like amazing of a year this year in video games is. And like for me, like I'm playing Final Fantasy 16 right now and I'm realizing how much that game is doing, but also it is also nowhere close to Zelda. But yeah, it's just I like back to my original point. I think Zelda's popularity is still like up there, but I think other games are competing for that top spot as well. I want to say one thing real quick. I am always talking to people about Game of the Year. I'm always talking to people about what games they're playing, what games they're into, what games are like on their mind in like the current 2023 landscape, right? A lot of people are talking about Zelda. A lot of people are. But again, I think the Western... But I hate to say this, but I really think the Western bias is going to play against Zelda this year. And I really hope it doesn't, because it has happened in the past to games that I've loved in this whole Game Awards space. But again, the Game Awards is...
What?
Oh my, don't even get me started,
What?
dude. I was so mad about Xenoblade 3 last year. I was
Xenoblade 3 snubbed for
mad.
best soundtrack and
here's
best
the
RPG?
thing.
What?
Here's the thing. People accepted it. They're like, oh, it's just the Game Awards. Oh, it's just Jeff Keighley. Oh, Xenoblade doesn't sell. Xenoblade isn't popular. I was like, that is a non-argument. That is not what you should be saying. Literally, like, that's not the whole point of this thing. Like, that's an entirely different discussion. But like,
because here's the thing, though. Xenoblade,
yeah,
you can say it's not popular, it doesn't
Yeah.
sell. It was popular enough that it
To
was
get
recognized at the
nominated.
Game Awards
Yeah.
at all. Like the fact that it
And-
was up for Game of the Year and up for Best
Yeah.
RPG and Best Soundtrack, that
To me-
says a lot.
to me, Xenoblade's snub of losing best soundtrack was almost equivalent to Horizon winning over Breath of the Wild. And that's a very egregious claim, I know, but like, I played both games. I played Ragnarok, I played Xenoblade 3. There's one game with a very good soundtrack. There's another game that goes above and beyond, and like, it is like, music was like a massive part of the development of all the Xenoblade games. So like, it's just weird. It's weird. And that was a very like, so here's the thing I will say about that. A lot of people are like, oh, people didn't play Xenoblade, they didn't complete Xenoblade, they didn't play enough. A lot of journalists and critics and reviewers have played Zelda, but I think what I'm hearing from a lot of people is that people are like, oh, what's your game of the year? A lot of people are saying Final Fantasy 16. A lot of people are saying Baldur's Gate. A lot of people are saying those two games in particular. I'm still hearing Zelda, but I'm not hearing Zelda as much as I thought I would. But that is also because, like I said before, other games have come out. Other games have had their moment of like popularity and all that. Andres is like, no, don't do this to me, Zelda.
No, I just, there's just something I gotta get off my chest.
Yeah.
I may have somewhat hinted at it earlier, but
Yeah.
I just think that because Tears of the Kingdom is so popular, because we have such a high standard for Zelda, that it's almost cool to not like Tears of the Kingdom, to kind of rag on it. Like,
Yeah.
I like, basically my take
It's
is, if
like
you
the
haven't,
Elden Ring
so just,
kind
I'm
of
just
thing.
gonna say this, right?
Yeah.
Whenever I see someone have a negative take on Tears of the Kingdom, I'm like, oh, okay, that's not like, I think it's more interesting when you have a positive take on Tears of the Kingdom,
Right.
as opposed to a negative take, because I just think like some
I
people
don't
like to
know.
rag on popular things.
Yeah.
But like with Tears of the Kingdom, and I don't know if this will represent the Game Awards, because the Game Awards, as you've kind of hinted at, Nishquik, it's biased. It's a biased show. There's definitely, it's not totally objective. Granted, when we're talking about ranking things, that's a subjective thing. So, there's
Yeah.
lots of layers to this. But I mean, totally, the Game Awards isn't the be all end all, right? There are other Game Award shows and all that. And maybe Tears of the Kingdom doesn't win. Maybe it does go to Baldur's Gate 3. Maybe there's something to be said that, because Nintendo went with a direct sequel,
Yeah.
it didn't have as much surprise and oomph.
Yeah.
Maybe. But what I do want to say about Tears of the Kingdom, though, is that while maybe a lot of fans and players will not be as aware of what was accomplished with Tears of the Kingdom, but the Tears of the Kingdom is a huge stride for the industry, I would say.
It's crazy that developers are coming out and saying, like, we haven't even thought about this in the brainstorming process of our video game. Like it was
what
blowing
Nintendo
developers'
accomplished with
minds.
Tears of the Kingdom, it is mind blowing. What they accomplished this game on the Switch, and it's a video I'm working on for today. It's somewhat related. Like the way that the Zelda team kind of operates, you know, they do what they can based off the limitations, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at here is that the reason we've waited so long for a proper open world Zelda game was because it wasn't really possible the way Nintendo envisioned it until the Wii U and Breath of the Wild, right? Once the Wii U was a thing, Nintendo was like, oh, we can technically do this, so let's do this. They definitely pushed the Wii U to get Breath of the Wild going. And with the Switch, they had a little bit more power, a little bit more expertise, and so they pushed it even further. And when you really kind of think about just how much more ambitious Tears of the Kingdom is over Breath of the Wild from a technical perspective, I think it's kind of mind-blowing, because it's keep in mind, the Switch is not even that much more powerful than the Wii U, right? It just has maybe less bottlenecks. But what's kind of crazy about it is that it's the world of Breath of the Wild, which is already like a staggering technical achievement with all the physics and everything going on. But then you layer on top of that a myriad of different sky islands.
Yeah.
I would say a notably improved lighting system as well. Whenever you're in the sky and you see those lights, it's kind of crazy. The textures are better in the game, by the way, as well. Like there's more advanced textures in this game.
It does look overall better than Breath of the Wild. I noticed that too. Yeah.
And then there's cave systems. There's hundreds of caves in this, you know, just below the surface, and then there's an entire underground world that is comparable in size to the surface, and you can go through all of that seamlessly.
Like,
but it goes beyond that because you can still build stuff, and it's layered with the physics system, and it interacts with almost every object in the world. But then on top of all of that, there are more NPCs and enemies you can interact with now. You can lead a charge with non-playable characters into an enemy camp, fight them all, and then also have 5 different allies fighting alongside all of that together with your builds, with the destruction, with the open world on the Switch. To me, them able to do all of that without major game-breaking slowdowns is just kind of mind-blowing. And I don't think you'll put that into perspective.
People don't realize. Like, I showed one of my friends Tears of the Kingdom, and the first thing I showed him was I got up to a very high sky island, and I just skydived right down into the depths, and he was like, whoa, how did you just do that? And I was like, I literally just did it. I just did it. And he's like, how is this like working on the Switch? And I was like, I don't know, dude, ask like Nintendo and Monolith Soft. Like, I was hoping after Xenoblade 3 people started to realize how like good Monolith Soft is. I hope they realize that with Tears of the Kingdom, because all of this stuff, it's mostly them doing all this like world interaction things. I'm pretty sure it's them, right? It's
I would imagine they have a decent role in it, because I know Monolith Soft has a dedicated Zelda team who works on Zelda. So I'd imagine they'd have something to do with it.
I know they play a role with the world building. That's all I can really say.
One thing to throw my hat in the ring for the Game of the Year conversation. When like in the lead up to Tears of the Kingdom, I was very much like, this is Game of the Year 2023. Like, no questions asked.
Lock.
It's my personal Game of the Year, so honestly, anything else doesn't really matter. I know it'll get nominated at the very least, which means we get to hear some of that great Zelda music from the orchestra like compilation beforehand. So I'll take that. It's very, very similar to Xenoblade 3 last year. And as these games came out, and it's like, oh, now we have Baldur's Gate and Final Fantasy and
Starfield.
I don't remember where I heard it, but there was this one YouTuber that I listened to who is so convinced that Spider-Man 2 is going to win Game of the Year over Tears of the Kingdom simply because it's coming out at the end of October instead of in May.
I will say this. Yeah. No, sorry, Nick, continue first.
My counter to that is Elden Ring won Game of the Year last year, and it came out in February?
And God of War was in November, and it's still
and
lost.
God of War lost. So, like,
Yeah.
yes, there is a recency bias, definitely, because, like, oh, this is the fresh thing. Like, oh, when I'm going in and voting, oh, what should I vote for? Oh, the thing I played most recently would be at the front of my mind. But I think Tears of the Kingdom is still a lock, just because of all the things Andres mentioned, and developers, like people who actually make games, are praising this game for how technically advanced it is. Not that it's about money, but you don't sell 10 million copies in 3 days and go unnoticed. Like,
that's 9 more than Xenoblade sold.
on a system that is 7 years old, by the way. This is literally the little engine that could type situation.
It's a portable device.
I still think
a 7-year-old portable.
I still think Tears of the Kingdom is a lock. It's gonna be very close.
It's
Is
gonna
it
be
a
very
rusty
close.
lock? Could like someone like maybe like break it down? You know, if they could take a hammer. And...
I don't know.
Baldur's
the only
Gate
one
could like chisel it.
Baldur's Gate, and everyone goes back to like, oh well, Baldur's Gate is rated higher than Tears of the Kingdom. Yeah, okay. Xenoblade 3 was rated higher than like 3 of the other Game of the Year nominees, and it
I will
still
say
lost.
this about Baldur's Gate though. I haven't played it. I don't think I will play it, but a lot of the people I've talked to who have played it are they're equally as mind blown with Baldur's Gate as we are and we have been with Tears of the Kingdom, because of all the things you can do, all the interactions, all the options, all the choices. It's a different kind of game.
Right.
And like how we talk about the ARM abilities and we're just like, oh, there's so much you can do in this game. They're saying the same thing with the Dungeons and Dragons choices in Baldur's Gate. So it will be interesting to see which game reigns supreme, but I think when it comes to the mainstream kind of consensus, people gravitate to the open world stuff. But again, the anti-Nintendo bias is there. I just know it's there. But
I think
like
it's got to win something.
Yeah,
it's got to win
it'll
at least
it'll
one
win something.
thing. I don't know what.
Isn't there a best
think-
adventure game?
Best adventure game, best game direction, best.
Well,
I
there's
just
no
wanna
way
see
Tears of the Kingdom doesn't
Fujibayashi-
win best adventure game.
I know, yeah, 100%.
There's no
See,
way.
but we said that about Xenoblade 3 last year with best RPG.
But the thing is,
No,
okay.
Elden
The thing
Ring
is
was
though,
there.
there is a straight up anti JRPG narrative with the game. Where it's a true narrative. It exists.
Persona 5, actually no, Persona 5 did not win anything. I don't think it did. Nier Automata won best OST, actually. So that's one thing. I think worse than Xenoblade 3 not winning was Xenoblade 2 not getting nominated for anything. That was even worse.
That's so rough though, because it came out in December, so it was after the cutoff, and then by the time you get to the next December, it was like,
yeah, because
if there's a case of recency bias, that might be one of them.
Yeah, no, it was just sad because even Octopath didn't win Best Music. They gave it to Red Dead Redemption 2, and I was like, Xenoblade 2, Octopath Traveler, Dragon Quest 11, you give it to Red Dead Redemption.
I'm gonna do something. Something. I think once Nintendo games are in 4K, some of these games getting kind of pushed to the wayside at the Game Awards is gonna change a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Like, I think once Monolith Soft is making a game that's at 4K, it's gonna be taken a little bit more seriously.
Oh my god, I know.
It's unfortunate, but you're so
it's
right.
really sad that we have to say that. It's really sad that we have to say once Nintendo starts making 4K games, they will be taken seriously. It's really sad that we have to say that, but I think that's what's gonna happen. And
for anyone in the chat
I
that's
agree
like,
with
hey, 4K Nintendo's not possible, you haven't been doing your research.
Yeah.
Google
You haven't
NVIDIA
been watching
DLSS.
the Switch
you haven't been
videos.
watching Andres Restart's YouTube channel. But I will say something about Tears of the Kingdom that a lot of people aren't talking about. And Andres, you were saying like Tears of the Kingdom criticism isn't like very substantial, right? I've been seeing some pretty decently good Tears of the Kingdom criticism. I've had like people I've talked to on my channel voice their criticism.
Let me clarify something. I'm not saying criticisms aren't valid. I'm just saying that people are very vocal about what I'm going to say are nitpicks for Tears of the Kingdom, and the same nitpicks that would exist for other games people aren't vocal about. That's my main point with that. It's not that I don't think Tears of the Kingdom couldn't have had a better story. It's not that I don't think Tears it could have had a better story. Yeah. But do I think they improved on it over Breath of the Wild? Yes. So I'm like, hey, they did a better job than Breath of the Wild. So I don't feel like ranking on it. That's just kind of my take on it. But there are other games that have a doo-doo story, and I'm just gonna be like, yeah, well, I'm not playing it for the story. So it's just kind of like people play Tears of the Kingdom for the story, for the adventure, for the combat, for the replayability. And when it doesn't measure up to every single standard, people complain about one thing or the other, right? It kind of depends on what you're looking for. But absolutely, I'm not trying to say Tears of the Kingdom is perfect. It's not. There's no such thing.
Yeah, but going off of that, I think when a lot of people bring up the criticism for Tears of the Kingdom, like what we were saying, they miss out on all of the other things that you can do in this game. And I think the craziest thing ever in this game, of course, the verticality, the scope of the world, all the things you can do, that's amazing. But I think the arm abilities are actually insane. I don't think we'll ever see anything like that in a video game. And we actually may not because of the Nintendo patents or whatever, but like, it's actually insane how a lot of this stuff works. Like, of course, we talked about Ultra Hand a lot. I want to talk about the other three, like Fuse, Recall, and Ascend. Like, Ascend is insane how, like, any flat surface you can just go up there. I loved playing around with Ascend. I thought it was a lot of fun. Recall was amazing because the first day that I got Tears of the Kingdom, like I got it Thursday night, and Friday I had a couple of my friends come over. We just played the game, got like food for takeout. We just played the game for like 8 hours straight. And these people don't like play Nintendo games that much. But when they saw this game, they were like, oh, do this. Oh, you can do this. And when they found Recall, they were like mind blown. They were like, hey, you're not solving the puzzle right. Give me the controller. And they would like take the controller from me. And I was like, I don't know what you're trying to do right now. I don't think it's gonna work. And then they do some crazy recall trick and it works in the shrine that we spent like 2 hours in. And just moments like that, I will never ever get from any other video game. Never. Like that is the shining star of this game. The arm abilities and the aha moments you get from using these arm abilities. Of course, Recall is just fun to like, Ascend is just fun to like ascend to the top and do some cool things with that. But
I want to mention just like a personal victory, a triumph of mine recently. I like recorded on my Switch, like a little 30-second record. I used the air bike to get to one of those high islands that have like the little glyphs you want to take a picture of for the side quest.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But when I landed, my air bike fell down. And I was like, oh crap, I have like no Zonite. I don't want to make another one.
Yeah.
And it was really far down. But I pressed recall and I saw like a little sliver of gold.
Oh, like the tiny yellow speck.
So I clicked it and it started coming back. But I dived down to land on top of it while it was
because it won't come all the way back up. There's like a certain like
I think it was so far down it wasn't gonna make it back. So I dived down, and as it ended, I got back on it and started riding it in midair, and I was like, oh my god, that's amazing.
I personally believe Nintendo did not playtest Recall at all. They just stuck it in there and were like, yeah, sure, whatever, it works. Because I was in a shrine, and I don't remember where the shrine was at. I think it was over in the Gerudo area, and it was one where you have to cross all this sand and like progressively get across it, and then the last part is it'll drop one of those little balls down, but there's a thing that just sends it flying clear across to the other side of the room, and you're clearly supposed to like get on one of those little like sled things, put a fan on it, go get it and bring it back. I pulled out recall and I was like, there's no way. There's no way that I can reach this ball. Recall, ball came all the way back, grabbed it with Ultra Hand, put it in. I didn't even have to finish the puzzle. And I was like, work smarter, not harder. Like,
yeah,
easy money. I love recall.
That's one thing, like your whole thing about work smarter, not harder. I was kind of shocked that people saw that as a negative in this game. They're like, oh, I can do like this easy way to cheese the shrine that just like cheapens the whole experience. And I'm like, no, it's not easy to find these cheese tactics. It's not easy to figure out like, I can Ultra Hand here and fuse this to this and like Ultra Hand this and ascend up here and I skip the whole shrine. It's not easy to do that. But when you figure that out, then it feels like rewarding. And like, that's what I loved about the shrines in this game. Breath of the Wild, there was like a clear-cut way to do a lot of the shrines. Even though there was like different ways that you would do it. Like, there was that one where you would push magnesis against the blocks to like move them up this like cylindrical path. And like, you could do that with stasis, you could do it with magnesis. But with Tears of the Kingdom, every single shrine, there was a different method to do it. And I would watch like other people play the game and they were doing it differently. And I was like, wow. And like I said, when my friends came over, they would like take the controller and do this completely different tactic, which would still work. So that's what I really
I do want to speak on the cheesing thing.
Yeah.
And not because I like cheese. I do like cheese, but I just mean that like I think there is something to be said that to that criticism. Because there are things you can kind of get through really easily if you take advantage of certain powers. And by the way, I think it's amazing. Like, we're talking about like how using recall or ascend is kind of mind-blowing, but when you start to combine them together, it gets even more crazy. It's like, oh, I can use recall and ascend in conjunction, and then, you know, crazy things start to happen. But I do also think that by Nintendo going this direction of kind of giving us this freedom, and it allows us to beat challenges a lot easier because we do work smarter, not harder. That it's great that that's in there. Like, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. It's a fantastic thing. But I do think there's a little bit of a give and take, because by giving us these abilities to kind of do all these crazy things and solve puzzles in a much more easy, safe way than what may have been intended, what happens is that, you make the game easier. You kind of take away from some of the satisfaction of accomplishing challenge, right? There's a reason people like hard games, because when you beat something that's hard, you feel like you really did something. And sometimes you may feel really smart about yourself for like kind of getting through something, but also when you start to do it a lot and things just start to feel too easy, I think it can take away a little bit from the game. So for example, and when I did this, I still felt really amazing about it. But now that I know I can do this, it takes away from what it is.
Yeah.
And this is a big spoiler. This is a spoiler cast, so we can't do this. We haven't really spoiled too much yet.
We're like an hour in. It's fine.
All right. So, but this is a big spoiler, okay? So, when I did the final fight, when I went to fight Ganondorf, it was tough, and I loved it. I died the first time, and it felt super challenging. I went in totally unprepared, and that made it really satisfying for me, especially the final phase. It was the most beautiful thing ever. I think you could argue it's like the best final boss fight sequence. Like, I think you can make it has that potential claim. And I was really happy about this when it happened, but it's just kind of about like going back to it afterwards for like refighting him. I was like on my last heart. I was like, and he had tons of life left. He had like a whole life bar left. And he takes
away your hearts.
Oh yeah, so like I realized that I just one more nip and I was done. Like, there was no hope for me. But I had one last rocket shield left.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it was a bomb shield. It was something to lift me into the air so I could go into the slow time. And I had just one left, and I was like, I got an idea, and I'm gonna do it. So I went to slow time. I pulled out my bow, and I saw I had several Gibdo bones. And I took out my 3-shot arrow, aimed at Ganon's head, and I just let them all rip. All of them. And I took out his entire health bar with just one heart left. When it looked, I was totally screwed and doomed. I wiped him out with that one move.
This was his Demon King form?
This was Demon King form.
Okay.
Like
Wow.
yeah, like that final
Those
duel.
Gibdo bones with the Savage Lionel bow. I don't know what bow you had, but
It was a 3 times Lionel bow.
yes, yeah. Those are insane if you have like really good fusions with them, because I would do that with the flux constructs. I would see them in the depths with their like laser. I would like get out the bow in midair. I would do exactly what you did. I would get the bullet time going, and bullet time is a little more forgiving in this game, way more forgiving than it is in Breath of the Wild.
I think it's not based off time; it's based off how many times you do an attack. So that's
how many times you pull the trigger.
It'll drop your stamina when you actually let a bow go, which I think, honestly, I think that's a lot better. Because 90% of the time in Breath of the Wild, you're trying to aim up your shot, and you're like, oh, I'm so close, and then out of stamina before you let the arrow go.
Yeah. So it was really cool, but I guess it was a really, really cool moment. Like, it was super satisfying, and then the final fight afterwards, like, it was a great end to my initial kind of effort. But now that I know I can just do that, I think Ganon's a cakewalk. Like, you go into slow time, you let it rip, he's done. Like,
okay.
And that kind of takes away from it.
So, I accidentally found the final boss, like, way too soon. I was only one temple in, and I was like, oh, I asked one of my friends, I was like, where did you find X item or whatever? And he was like, oh, it was under Hyrule Castle. And I was like, okay, cool. So I went down looking for this specific item, just kind of following the natural path. And I get to the end where there's like this big circle platform. And I had already passed like, oh, that's where we were in the beginning of the game. And oh, that's like, oh, there's the mural. I can now like open up the rest of the murals and see what they were. And then I like walk to the end and I'm like, oh, it's giving me a prompt to jump. Sure, I'll jump. Let me save real quick. Went down, pulls out like the Demon King army, and I was like, oh, this is the final boss. Okay, I got my butt absolutely kicked because it was just me and Tulin against the world. And I was like, okay, cool.
Oh yeah, it was only
Can't do that yet. So I went back and did it, and I didn't really know what I was expecting. I kind of did it on a whim. I wasn't planning on doing the final boss that night. And I went in there, and I didn't know to take, like, the gloom repairing health food. So I just had my normal food. And, man, I kind of wish I could have recorded my reaction to that final fight, because I was screaming and losing my mind, especially when I would swing and Ganondorf would flurry rush so that I could hit him.
Insane.
And I was like, what?
He did it too.
I was like, wait a minute. Only I'm supposed to be able to do that. This is not a two-way street. I will say, Ganondorf fight, leagues above
Dark Beast Ganon.
Calamity Ganon.
Calamity Ganon,
Any way, shape, or form. Any way you want to cut it. It just feels more epic, too. Like that cutscene that plays before, and then like he pulls out his sword, and then Link pulls out his sword, and it's kind of like this mano-y-mano fight where they're going at it. I was like, that's it.
So,
you know,
something I was gonna say, it's something I felt they needed to do, and I was optimistic they would, and they did, was improving on the antagonist of the game. Because with Calamity Ganon, it was this really cool force of nature, but there wasn't really like a relationship between Link and Calamity Ganon. So you fight this force of nature, you beat it, and then there's a stupid giant pig that does nothing. Like that was maybe like not the best way to handle the antagonist of a Zelda game. But they kind of, I think they did a stellar job with Ganondorf, because they actually did a lot to build up the relationship. It's not just with the flashbacks where you see him in the past. It's also ongoing throughout the game, because as you're doing the dungeons, there is the puppet Ganon, right? Who pretends to be Zelda. So there's a whole storyline in the current time, not just in the past, which is a massive improvement over Breath of the Wild, which just had the story in the past. Tears of the Kingdom had both. But then and then when you actually meet him in Hyrule Castle, and you have that interaction with him where he talks to you. Never mind the beginning of the game, right? Which was also really cool. And you have that interaction, and the sages jump in. Like, that's really cool. Yeah. But then on top of that, just randomly, as you explore the world, even if you ignore all the story, Puppet Ganon does come out. Like, you do have those interactions, and the deeper and deeper you get into the game. So you have several interactions with Ganon regardless of how you choose to handle your adventure, there is a relationship built up. There's more interactions with Link and Ganon in Tears of the Kingdom than any other Zelda by far. So there is a relationship built up, and then as you said, like that final sequence, that dialogue, it's epic. Like there's a lot more to the relationship between Link and Ganon in this game that makes the fight feel a lot more satisfying.
Yeah,
I really
the fight
like.
was great. Yeah,
I really like how this felt like things came full circle, because in like the prologue of the game, obviously Link gets attacked by the Malice, loses his arm, breaks the Master Sword, whole 9 yards. He doesn't know where Zelda goes. So from Link's perspective, lost his arm, Zelda's gone. But then you start hearing all of these rumors of like, oh, well, Zelda's here, Zelda's there, and you as the player / Link are very hopeful that like, oh, this is Zelda, like she's okay, she just got teleported somewhere outside of the castle and she's been okay. And then when you do get to Hyrule Castle and you have that whole like where you're kind of following her through these different points, is when you kind of start to be like, oh, I don't think that's actually Zelda. Which if you've done the memories, you'll know that's not actually her. But if you haven't, you're kind of like, oh, this is her. And then that cutscene in the throne room is just so good. Where Zelda's like, don't you remember our time here? And like
she kind of like beckons you too. Like it's like this romantic tease, but you know there's something way off. Which
is funny that Ganondorf innately played into that as part of like his deception for Link, is that he played into the like Ganondorf romantic tension, and he saw them together for like 30 seconds, and that was his perception of them. So anti-Zelink shippers can even Ganondorf ships it. So anyway, I really like
so true.
It's so true.
Even Ganondorf's in on it. So like, I don't know, but I did really like how he like you do the initial fight and then he sends like the Malice after your arm again, and Link like braces for it, and then the sages show up, and then in the final fight, when I think it's when he's in his Demon King form, Ganondorf says, I'll take far more than your arm this time. Yeah. Like they just kept hitting on that point of this is the connection between them. Is Link's the hero, Ganondorf's the antagonist, and they're gonna fight, and it's great.
And he was looking forward to the fight too. Like Ganon wanted to fight him. Like Ganon's like, oh, there's gonna be someone who you think can measure up to me.
Because Rauru hyped him up, man.
Yeah, he did.
That was like Rauru's dying words.
Ganondorf was Ganondorf's been like anticipating this moment.
He's like, okay.
Yeah.
I'd say he's probably a little disappointed in the beginning when like the Master Sword breaks and Link just like kind of falls over. He's like, what? That was it?
Yeah, I was ready.
This guy Rauru hyped you up, man. I've been waiting here for 10,000 years, and that's all you got? That's it?
He probably thought he had it in the bag at that point.
He's like, oh, this guy's easy.
Yeah.
But so what gets even cooler though, right, is, and I made a video about this, kind of like trying to analyze like Ganondorf as a character. And I think a lot of people can go into it and just kind of think that he's just straight evil and there's nothing more to it than that. And that's fine. Like if that's how you interpret it, that's fine. I'm not saying you're wrong. But I think there's enough material for you to maybe look a little bit deeper, because he was the king of the Gerudo, right? Like he's a sole male amongst an entire civilization of women, right? So just think about that in terms of real world scenario. Like if you're the one man that rules all of these women, you're gonna think really highly of yourself, you know?
Yeah.
Like think of it like this. Think of it like, so you know, like athletes in sports, when you're like a professional athlete, your mental like psyche, your perspective on the world is so warped compared to other men, because you've been kind of conditioned to think that you are kind of like bigger and better than everyone around you, right? And so then like multiply that for someone like Ganondorf, right, who is the sole male amongst all of these women, right? Like there's a lot of that. But what gets kind of, so he has like, I guess, this high expectation, right? Like he thinks he deserves the world and he's gonna take it. But there's other little layers to it, right? Because like you look back at the Wind Waker and that version of Ganondorf, there's some semblance of him wanting a better land for his people. So that is actually, I would argue, somewhat hinted at here, because they're coming from the Gerudo region and they're fighting at the Great Plateau, which is kind of like the boundaries of the desert and like the green pastures of Hyrule. So they kind of wanted more land. So there is actually like some like almost like legitimate reason for Ganondorf making those efforts, but it was plagued by dark stuff too. So I don't know if you guys knew this, you may have, but there is a version or the version of Kotake and Koeme neck by his side. Yeah. So the two Gerudo witches from Ocarina of Time, there's younger versions of them by his side in the flashbacks. So I don't know if you could either interpret that as different incarnations or just them as younger versions before Ocarina of Time. I don't want to get into timeline interpretations, but there's point is that there's some version of them next to him, and if they're anything like the versions of Ocarina of Time, they may have also kind of like bewitched him a little bit, kind of set him up to think in a certain way, right? So I guess what I'm getting at here is it's almost like Ganondorf was almost like destined to like have this perspective of, let's take on the land of Hyrule. We deserve it. We own it. It is mine, right? So there's a lot of pride there. It's not just straight evil. There's a little bit more. It's a little bit more nuanced. Is with what I'm at least arguing there's material for you to interpret that if you so choose. And then, you know, he does all the deception and he gets the secret stone. He like cements himself as a demon king, right? So there's this transformation. Like I think like he's Ganondorf, but when he gets the secret stone and all the dark magic, like he definitely has like a fall to like darkness. Like that's what he desires the most. But what I think is almost sad, though, when you think about how prideful he is, how powerful he is, he gives up on his reign during the fight with Link. And I think that kind of makes it sad, because from Breath of the Wild, the story of Calamity Ganon is Ganondorf kind of relying on Calamity Ganon after generations of trying to take over Hyrule. So, and then eventually he even gives up on Calamity Ganon, and he has his final fight with Link. And when he's defeated by Link, he's like, screw it. I'm going to give it all up. If it means at least I can stop you and I can destroy everything, I'm okay with that. So he takes the secret stone.
Rule in a world of ashes.
Right. So he loses himself to become the demon dragon. And I think that's kind of sad. It's kind of sad that he gives up on himself at the end. Yeah.
It's like that. It's that very, if I can't have it, then no one can. So I'm gonna kill you in the process. And it's very interesting that he let his pride take over at the end, because he couldn't just accept getting beat. So he was like, you know what? Fine. I'll eat the stone. I'll do it. I'm very curious where he got that knowledge from. Like,
he knows of the Zonai, right? So like there's
he hints that he knows about Zonai lore and Zonai things when he's talking to
wish we knew about Zonai lore. That would be great, Nintendo, but knowing Nintendo, this will be a one and done thing and we'll never see the Zonai again.
Well, there'll be a game 10 years from now where we'll be like, oh, is this a hint towards the Zonai?
Yeah.
They'll
put a singular spiral in the next game and we'll be like, oh, but guys, this could be the Zonai in this next
The Zonai are the new Twilight, right? Because we felt that way about the Twilight. And then there's going to be another tribe that's going to be like the Pulu or whatever.
Yeah.
And we'll be like, oh, that's them.
Yeah. I will say, if we're talking about story stuff now, I'll give some like opinions on the story. I might have said this in the beginning, but I'm going to be a little critical about some story stuff. Not like very critical, but I will just say that I wanted, like, I think the story did a better job than Breath of the Wild, but there were some very like small things that didn't really translate properly when you like sit down and think about it.
Secret Stone, Demon King,
that stuff is there, and like that is a complaint of mine, and I didn't really realize that until other people were like really complaining about it. I was like, oh, it's fine or whatever. I just think that like I went to Hateno Village and I was like, oh dude, it's Hateno Village, I haven't been here in so long, and I started talking to a lot of people, And I just found it so weird that they're talking to you as if they've never met you in their life. And I'm like, guys, guys, I'm Link. Hello, I'm Link. Hello, it's me, it's Link.
I own a house here, by the way.
Yeah, and I just found that so weird. And like, there's other things that are very inconsistent, like no one talks about the Sheikah tech, and like I have my own kind of headcanon of what happened to the Sheikah tech. I think some of it was used for the Skyview towers, some of it was like shoved down into the depths and like corroded with the gloom and the malice. Sure, but I just found it very weird that Puro, Robbie, Josha, no one says a word about anything Sheikah tech related or anything about like anything that happened in Breath of the Wild. Hardly anyone mentions anything about what happened in Breath of the Wild. And there's some other like inconsistencies with people not knowing who Link is, some people remembering things from the past, and it just felt very, very weird. And like when I went to the Shrine of Resurrection, I was like, oh, the fact that all this stuff is gone, oh, it's gonna be explained later. Like they'll talk about it later, and then no one does, and I was like, okay.
I almost wonder if they did
strange.
That so that it didn't feel like you had to play Breath of the Wild.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. They shouldn't have done that.
I don't think they should have done it, but I guarantee you that's why.
Yeah.
Because
it's such a Nintendo thing, and I'm like, don't be afraid to make a direct sequel. Like with the fact that it wasn't the same Hyrule.
But there's a lot of people who have only played Tears of the Kingdom. There's a lot of people who didn't play Breath of the Wild, just went straight to Tears of the Kingdom.
I don't think that would have been much of a problem if it was not like a lot of this world building interconnected stuff. It wouldn't have like hindered the experience, I think.
Yeah, so this is my take.
Because like only us know that Typhlo Ruins was pitch black in Breath of the Wild. Newcomers don't know that with Tears of the Kingdom, and that's fine. And like if they talked about some Sheikah tech here and there, they might have been like, oh, are they talking about things that happened in the past? Oh, maybe I can co-play Breath of the Wild and see all that stuff that happened there. Yeah.
My take, because I understand what you're saying. Like, there's definitely moments when I was playing, I was like, oh, why don't they know who Link is? But there's also plenty of moments where they do know who Link is. And so I guess my problem is I guess some people go through the game and think that they say there's zero acknowledgement of the past, which is not true. There's actually a lot of acknowledgement of the past.
It's just very inconsistent.
It is inconsistent, and that I think is that is fair to say. There's inconsistency, and I think ultimately it does go to Nick's point that they were trying to balance. They try to do both. They try to balance a game where there were references and it was a sequel, but at the same time they wanted to do it in a way where some people who didn't play Breath of the Wild could go in fresh and it would be totally fine. And I think that's why we see those inconsistencies. Do I think they could have done it better? Yeah. And it's kind of weird because like I feel like there are moments in the game where I will have completed a side quest and that side quest leads to other characters in another part of the map being different. So it's kind of weird because they did put in some time and effort to kind of like think, oh, okay, so what happened in one part of the game can change the future, but it doesn't apply across the board. So yeah, I mean, I guess maybe if they had put a little bit more time and energy to, I guess maybe localization, because a lot of it comes down to localization too, right?
Okay.
Like because it's a lot of this just comes down to what the little text blurbs say, you know. So
yeah.
That may matter. Like I didn't play the Japanese version. I don't speak Japanese. Like I wonder if for Japan players, right, if they play the game and they don't see as many inconsistencies, because that could be an element, you know.
I've heard some of Ganondorf's dialogues are very different in other languages. Interesting. Like they mean different things.
But I guess my ultimate take is just like it. Like for me, it's just kind of like. I guess everyone's kind of left to create their own headcanon, and that is, the games are made, they intentionally do that, right? Like they intentionally leave things in a way where people are left to interpret. Like with the Famitsu interview and the timeline stuff, they're like, oh, well, yeah, maybe you could interpret it as there was a destruction of Hyrule before Hyrule, or maybe not. That you can just make of it what you will.
Who's to say?
Who's to say exactly, right? So like when you talk about like Link, for example, and some of the people most of the people in Hateno don't recognize him, you could interpret that as, well, Link's always been a loner, right? He's not a talkative person to begin with. He does go through transformations, right? His hair is longer, his hand is damaged, but also his house, yes, it's in Hateno, but it's also in the outskirts. So kind of an interesting little point
you can
I'll say.
Zelda's occupied the house more than Link has.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, you can ride your horse in Hateno, right? But when you go inside a village, the horses automatically only trot. They slow down, you're not allowed to gallop, but you're allowed to gallop where Link's house is, implying that the way they interpret where Link's house is the outskirts of the town, not like the town itself.
Right.
So I'm just saying that, you know, you could look at it as, given that Link's a loner, he's working a lot, he's probably in and out all the time. It's actually been years since Breath of the Wild. You could maybe argue that there's a reason why not all the characters would recognize him. Yeah. Do I think it would have been nice if a couple would be like, oh, Link, it's been such a long time? Yes. And there is one. There is Simon in the school.
Yeah.
But that's the teacher, one. Like, but no one else. So I don't know. But at the same time, I also don't remember anyone from Hateno either. Like, I don't remember their faces. If they swapped them with other people, would have been like, oh, okay. Except for the weird pink guy.
Yeah.
I think
who's he?
Yeah.
I think there are like the important characters remember you. Like when you go to Terrytown, Bolson and his wife. Or not, is it Bolson? Is that the one in Terrytown?
Hudson.
Bolson
actually doesn't remember you. Bolson in
like,
Lurelin Village doesn't really remember you, which I was like,
he's probably just drunk. Bolson. He's probably just always drunk.
I mean, honestly, yeah.
Dude's
but
always sleeping and laying around the floor, like
Lurelin. Yeah.
Even when you go to Terrytown, like Hudson and his wife recognize you, which I think is very important because Link is the reason they're even together. Because in Breath of the Wild, you put together Terrytown, and then that's how they meet.
Yeah.
And then obviously all four of the sages remember you, and the characters kind of adjacent to the sages remember you. So long as those characters do, I think it's passable that some of the NPCs don't.
Yeah.
Like, I can excuse it in a way. So.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Do you guys have anything else to say about the story? Because I
have a few other things I want to say about the story.
I have a closing thing for the story.
I mean, there's a lot I could say, right?
I have a few things I want to say.
We're going to make this podcast because we could go 12 hours.
As long as the conversation goes. I'm not going to stop it.
I have a few things I want to say. And like the story wasn't bad. I liked the memories. I liked all that stuff. I think the presentation and the direction was a little off because I know a lot of people, like, I even think this happened with you, Nick. Like, you went to Minoru way ahead, right?
Absolutely.
And yeah, and like that's fine and all, but like I just think that they should have had more of a sequence with this game. I think they should have blocked off Thunderhead Isle. I wish that if you went in there, you get like electric shocked and like thrown out of that area, so that you don't go in there and you don't see what's in there and you see it as like a surprise later on, right? I kind of wish that. Another thing I wish is that the Kakariko village, like, whole thing with Kakariko was completely changed up. Because you go to Kakariko, they say you can't go into the Ring Ruins. Zelda told us not to go into the Ring Ruins. You can hardly climb anywhere in Kakariko because that old man will yell at you, don't go to the Ring Ruins, right? So that was annoying. What I wished is that the more you complete the dungeons, things change in the world. So maybe you complete one dungeon, whichever dungeon it is, doesn't matter. Maybe one of the big ring ruins falls down into Kakariko Village. You go to Kakariko, you talk to them, you see what's happening, you learn more about some of the Zonai stuff. And then maybe you do 2 more dungeons, and then another ring falls. So it's more of a sequence thing. And then, like, because I just found it very weird that the whole game, like the early game, before I did any of the dungeons, they're like, oh, don't go to the ring ruins, oh, don't do any of that. And then when I all I had to do was tell them, hey, Zelda was an imposter the whole time after the whole Hyrule Castle thing. And they're like, oh, okay, Link, yeah, please go up to the Ring Ruins. I thought that was very silly how that was done.
Wasn't real Zelda.
Yeah, and I'm like, first of all, I did the memories, so I knew this way, way, way back. Second of all, I did all the dungeons, so I kind of knew this. So it just felt weird to me. It wasn't like I was discovering things. It was always just like, oh, I just want these people to know what I already know, kind of thing.
Right.
And there's another like good example of that. I literally just had it in my head about the whole like, oh yeah, it was the whole fifth sage thing. Because when Pura's like, oh, we need the fifth sage. Oh, we need to find the fifth sage. And Link's like, oh, I already found the fifth sage. So I just wish things had more of a sequence so that Link isn't just sitting there in the background being like, oh, I've already done this. Yeah, sorry, I've already done this. Right. Like, even when I'm talking to Minoru, she was like, Link, you need to find the sword that seals Etargnus. Link, I know that you must find it. I know, like, here's the whole context for that. And you're just like, oh, by the way, I already did that.
It's literally on my back right now.
Yeah. Like, and I was just like...
So that's like, the challenge of being able to do things out of order and also having a story.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, if you do things out... If you have the freedom to do things out of order, but you also want to have a story... The story then needs to be able to tell itself in different ways to match that, and that can become very challenging. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying, you know, it's kind of like, hey, you want a good story? Hey, you want full freedom and open world exploration?
Yeah.
Okay, here's both. But there may be times where the story seems a little awkward because of that. Now, I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's harder.
To that point, that's why all of the, like, end of dungeon cutscenes are all pretty much the same verbatim, is because that could be your first time hearing that information. Second, third, fourth time, it's a little repetitive, but any one of those dungeons could be your first dungeon, and that's why they are that way.
Yeah, I kind of wish they just chose a direction of just telling us a piece that's kind of
unique
different
dialogue for each
sage. That just fills in a different piece to the puzzle. And I mean, the thing is, they tell us about the imprisoning war like 6 or 7 times in the game. Like, I don't know, like maybe there should, like, I don't know, Rauru should have told us about the imprisoning war on the Great Sky Island. That way there wouldn't need to tell us about the imprisoning war at the dungeons. And it's kind of more like they tell us about it, but they're kind of more like telling us like something else about it that we don't already know.
Yeah.
Right. I don't like... Okay, so in Breath of the Wild, you could do the memories out of order. That didn't really matter because they were memories.
Yeah, and I know what you're getting at.
You weren't as involved. Like, you were just kind of like, oh, here's what happened. Here's how the champions died, blah, blah, blah. In this game, I feel like you actively get spoiled if you do the memories out of order. There is a definitive start here, end here. Like, Sonya's death was one of the first cutscenes I saw.
Yeah, same.
And I was like,
I don't think that was done very well.
You gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
Like, and even if there was... Because there's the quest that's like, collect the dragon's tears or whatever. Even if it just put the little yellow dot on the map for... the next chronological one to go to. And I know that takes out like you need to find them, but it's like, okay, then just ping the general direction. Also, they're giant geoglyphs. It's not like they
made them easy to find on purpose.
Yeah.
Right.
Because in Breath of the Wild, they're hard to find. So I think like the casual player won't necessarily find all the memories and unlock the secret ending. I think they made it easier so more people can experience the story.
Right.
But then if we do it out of order, I agree there's a little bit of a spoiling thing. My take is, listen, I understand that they wanted to have like the different symbols and they wanted the flashback memory to kind of match it, but really the symbols are very ambiguous.
Vaguely connected.
They're all vaguely connected. Like, I feel like you could have just done a thing where they tell, like, regardless of which geoglyph you go to, you are just told the story in sequential order.
Right.
To me, that would have been better.
I will say this: the Forgotten Temple has the sequence, it has the order that you're supposed to see them in, but you get the quest from Impa when you're in like, I don't know, like Dueling Peaks or Necluda, which is like all the way like the south of the map, and Forgotten Temple is all the way in Hebra. So no one's gonna go all the way to the Forgotten Temple to see all the sequence of the memories or the geoglyphs.
I hear the argument brought up, and yes, if I was fully committed to seeing the story in order, I could have. But the thing is, the game is designed so you can play it at your own pace in your own way. I don't want to. First off, you have to follow the story sequences to go, so as you just noted, right? You have to go there, and if someone does things in their own way, they may skip that until like way later into the game, right? And so, yes, when you go there, you do see the symbols, and you can record it, acknowledge it, so you can go in the right order. But odds up, there's a strong chance a lot of people will have gone to a geoglyph or two before even getting there, right? And so that could already kind of take away from that. But also, who wants to acknowledge that exact order and then follow it throughout their experience, right? You want to explore the world in your own way. And so when you chance upon a geoglyph, you don't want to be like, oh, well, that's not the geoglyph I'm supposed to go to yet. I'm going to wait till later. No, you want to explore right there in the moment. So I kind of just feel like that is a part that I think could have been handled a little differently. And I think what I suggested is a very simple way to do it. Just whatever geoglyph you go to, that is the order.
You see the next one.
You see the next one, and that's it.
I will say, though, that was a problem I had with the memories. Otherwise, the memories were amazing.
They were so good.
I loved Rauru. I loved Sonia. Really,
I wish I got more.
Yeah, I wish I got more with them. It was sad to see Sonia get killed that way. And
I wish Sonia had a little more screen time.
I wanted to see more of her. I wish she got more screen
time. Yeah.
Like, they were very cool characters, and I wanted to know more about them, and I want to know more about their like lineage, because they didn't even talk about their kids. It is basically assumed that they do have kids.
This is a gripe I have. This is something I disagree with a lot of people on the internet. People call it a plot hole because they didn't talk about the kids. I don't think that's considered a plot hole. I mean,
they have kids, they just didn't talk about them.
That's just leaving room for interpretation. Yeah.
Because Rauru literally acknowledges, oh yeah, that makes me like your great 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 granddad or whatever.
Yeah, we have a blood connection.
Like, it's exactly like
Sonia says that. Yeah,
they technically do tell you they have kids. It's just it's implied.
We don't see them
exactly,
and it's not a big deal.
I think the ancient hero is connected to them in some way.
Well, I think another thing to consider is that we don't know how old Rauru and Queen Sonia are. Like, we act like they're like we don't know. Like, I think some people assume that the kids should be like 5 or 6 year olds, like running around. They may already be adults already, right? Like, Rauru and Sonia might be
one of the Zonai warriors with the spears and the masks.
They might be. I also think this is like theorizing, right? But I feel somewhat confident saying that their lineage is somewhat hinted at by the hero's aspect. I'm not saying the hero's aspect is like literally Raru's son, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's like Raru's like grandson or something.
Yeah, that's what I said. The ancient hero is connected to them in some way.
I think that the ancient hero is probably like the product of a Gerudo and a Zonai.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, the red hair, the tail.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put I'm gonna put this prediction in right now, so I can look back and see if I'm right or wrong. I think
look back.
We're gonna get another Hyrule Warriors game, but it's gonna be the Imprisoning War.
Imprisoning War, yeah.
But they're gonna find some like time loophole to also bring Link back, because it would be weird if he wasn't there. So they'll find like some weird loophole to be like, oh, Link actually grabbed Zelda's hand and then they got whisked back in time together. And now they're fighting the Imprisoning War. And much like Age of Calamity, which, spoilers for a 3-year-old game anyway, has a different ending than Breath of the Wild because of the time travel. And the way they did that game tells me that they're not opposed to doing it again, especially based on how well Tears of the Kingdom sold. Like, I would buy that in a heartbeat. If there was like, hey,
they're
you can
100%
play as
doing
the
that,
original sages, you can play as Rauru, Sonia, Minoru, Zelda, Link, like it's all there. They just have to turn it into a game. So I wouldn't be shocked if in the next 2-3 years we see Hyrule Warriors Imprisoning War on Nintendo Switch 2.
I think it's basically a lock. It's I think it's basically a no-brainer for Nintendo to do that.
I like
and if
your
they
theory.
do have timeline manipulation things, I think they're gonna bring in the heroes aspect, and we're gonna learn more about him. I really hope they.
So I love
learn
the theory.
about the ancient hero.
Love it, but you know what I don't love? Another Warriors game.
Really?
Why? You don't like him?
They're okay. They're
I need to
good.
continue Three Hopes. I
just-
enjoyed what I played of Three Hopes. I need to continue that.
I just think it would be nice to have something. I want another Zelda spin-off. I just don't want another Zelda spin-off to be another Warriors game. I feel like
So what you're saying is Link's Crossbow Training 2, but it's actually Tears of the Kingdom,
kinda.
and you can use the Joy-Cons. I mean, I would be.
So all right. So I think I'm not saying you're wrong. I think there's a great chance that could happen. You know, I think it comes down to, do they want to stick with the wild Tears of the Kingdom era, or do they want to just like move on, right? And some part of me thinks that like to have a Warriors game that's based off Tears of the Kingdom on Switch 2, if they're not going to even like, if they're just going to move on from it entirely, that's kind of like my hesitance to the idea. But I will also say this. I think it makes sense for Nintendo to get something cool, something that's going to excite the Zelda fan base early on into the Switch 2 life cycle. Because let's be real, to the next actual true open air Zelda game is probably going to take if we're lucky 4 years, but reality probably another 5 to 6.
We're going to be
take a
halfway
while.
through Switch 2, assuming it
best.
comes out next year. We're going to be halfway through
At
before
best.
we get another Zelda game.
Yeah, so I think they should do something to kind of give us, like, I think they got to give us some kind of like Zelda experience early on. And I'm kind of theorizing that maybe they give us like a Zelda remake, but maybe it's not a Zelda remake. And maybe the reason we're not getting Tears of the Kingdom DLC is because they're just going to take whatever expansion adventure there would have been as DLC, and it's going to be a standalone release.
Oh.
And
Like a
maybe
little
maybe it is a prologue. Maybe it is about the hero's aspect and he's the main character or something. And it's kind of like, like a
I
mini
would love
Zelda.
to play that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I mean,
It's an idea. Yeah, I think your idea is more likely, just for the record. Like, I think if we have to place bets, a Hyrule Warriors imprisoning war is way more likely.
I do agree with you. I think they have to do something early on Switch 2. Otherwise, you lose all of these Zelda fans from the Switch with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. You lose all those people, and you have to have something to bring them over. And as much as I want to play them, and I want them to come to Switch, Twilight Princess and Wind Waker aren't going to do that. Because we see, like, Breath of the Wild, 30 million. Skyward Sword HD, 3.5. Like, it did not sell much more than it did on Wii. So it didn't see that conversion of fans. So you need something that they're already attached to. So you can do the ports for the people who want them, but then the next year, you can be like, here's Hyrule Warriors Imprisoning War based on those two games that you really love. So now you can move on to the next system.
I am also one of those people. Yeah.
Move over.
Yeah, I agree. I was just gonna say I'm also one of those people who thinks that Twilight Princess and Wind Waker are not as important as other ports, but
No,
that's a discussion for another time.
They're really not. If anything, there are a lot of other Zelda games that need a port, like Ocarina of Time.
There are a lot of other Nintendo games that need ports.
Okay, ports
Xenoblade Chronicles X.
or
Xenoblade X.
remakes.
I would love a full
Definitive
Ocarina
editions.
of Time.
They need definitive editions.
No.
Like
Well, okay,
Xenoblade X.
all right. Definitive Edition is almost a remake, so yeah, maybe that.
It's pretty close.
But like,
Yes, but
Nintendo's
no, I
very
wouldn't
willing
call
to do
yeah.
remakes nowadays. Though they're remaking Thousand Year Door. That's a remake. It's being made in the Origami King engine. Like, I think this idea that Nintendo wouldn't do a remake for Zelda, it's not as far-fetched now as it was 5 years ago. Because obviously 5 years ago, Nintendo's like, yeah, we'll remake Skyward Sword, puts it in an emulator, right? Like, yeah, it's definitely. I think there's a chance, especially to my point of like about them wanting to get something major Zelda early on. Like, I think a Zelda remake would definitely be a bigger deal than a Wind Waker Twilight Princess like HD port. Like, totally. Like, remember that Zelda U demo? Like
Oh my gosh.
it's like
Don't
it's
even get me
Twilight Princess
started.
on like magic steroids.
Yeah.
Imagine
Yeah.
if that was like actually the Twilight Princess remake.
Like a Twilight
that
Princess
for Ocarina of Time.
remake, as opposed to just bringing over Twilight
Yeah.
Princess HD. Oh man.
Yeah, or just give us Ocarina of Time remake, but like in that kind of visual, to that level of visual fidelity.
I think they would also go back and remake some of the 2D games too. Like I wouldn't be shocked if at some point we saw a port, remaster, remake, whatever of A Link Between Worlds, and like, or even A Link
It's
to
a
the
good
Past.
game.
Like any of those more like older, not that Link Between Worlds is that old, but
Sure, but those are the easier games to remake.
right,
Yeah.
throw them in the Link's Awakening engine. There you go. You got another
Yeah.
top-down
Oh, for
Zelda
sure.
remake right there.
We should get a new one at some point too, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be
I hope
great.
so.
Yeah.
I feel like Link's Awakening was the testing ground of like, okay, how much would a 2D Zelda sell? Because we're gonna use one of the more
It
popular
did well.
ones.
It did better than Skyward
a-
Sword.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which man, I'm sad. I feel like Skyward Sword didn't do as good because it had such a
I think
bad
more
rap.
people need to play Skyward
from
Sword.
Wii.
And the thing is, like, people complain about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, saying they don't have dungeons, they don't have story, they don't have this, that, whatever, right? And they
play
keep saying
Skyward Sword.
they want, Skyward Sword to me is the most. You know how people say traditional Zelda? I think Skyward Sword is the most traditional Zelda that people describe. It has the most complex dungeons. It has a very in-depth story. It is very linear. It has the music that people miss. And sure, Wind Waker and Twilight Princess have that, but I think Skyward Sword does it in a very,
If there's
very
a spectrum,
unique way.
it's all the way at the other end of the spectrum. It's on the linear end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And that is like that. It's an interesting point because there are a lot of Zelda fans that kind of criticize Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. It's like they wish it was more like Skyward Sword, but yet Skyward Sword had disappointing sales.
No, they don't say they wish it was like Skyward Sword. They wish it was like Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess. Skyward Sword is just a pariah because of the motion controls, and I'm like, guys, it's not
Which
as bad.
anyone
as
who
you
criticizes the
think.
motion controls, you have no excuse because on Switch you can play without the motion controls entirely.
Exactly.
I actually
It's
like
the
that
in-
enough.
It's the inferior way to play, but you can do it.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
that's how I
I never
played it.
thought
I
the
liked
motion
it.
controls were that bad on Wii or on Switch. Like both playthroughs I did of Skyward Sword, I played it twice on Wii and once on Switch. All three of them I did motion controls, and I had a blast.
I think the motion controls were a fun gimmick. I don't think every Zelda game ever should have it, but I think for Skyward Sword, it definitely works. And I
You guys
enjoy
want to know something funny?
No.
You know how like we are talking right now, like, or we're thinking like, we got open world Zelda. Where do they go from here? Like, what can they do to one up, like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom?
Open worlder.
No, I thought that with Skyward Sword back in the day when I was younger. I was like, you can like actually be Link with the sword and shield. Where do they go from here? They can't go back to just buttons. No, we have to like get into the actual game this time now. And I was like, we have to like go a step up with the motion controls. I was super gung ho with motion
I
controls.
was
back
actually
then,
playing
but-
Beat Saber on the Oculus last night with my brother, right? So it's kind of funny we're like talking about this, but like a VR Zelda like that would be fun.
Yes, but
Definitely,
I was
definitely
talking
not as
about
like a
this with.
mainline, but that would be.
I was
a cool
talking about
spin-off.
this with some people. Like, I think VR is very restricted to certain genres. I don't know how Zelda would work in VR, but I think other Nintendo games like Star Fox and Metroid would be so amazing in VR.
They would have to build a Zelda specifically for VR. They couldn't just take a pre-existing one. It'd have to be like Zelda VR.
Do you remember the Zelda adventure from Nintendo Land? I think it would kind of be like that if they did a VR Zelda.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah.
That was cool. Ever since I saw that like interesting like treadmill thing for VR where it's like this circular platform that's like a conveyor belt that moves and it's omnidirectional.
Yeah.
So like you use it with a VR headset, and so you can move around in all directions in place. So
Yes.
it gives you basically you can do whatever you want that way. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, because you're at the convention, right?
Yeah. Where we talked about Nintendo in VR, but that's another story for another time.
Oh, that's So
Yeah.
to slowly start wrapping things up, here's what I'm gonna ask. I know we kind of already have an answer, but I want to ask you guys anyway. Do you think Nintendo tries to squeeze a third game out of this, or are they just done?
Please, no. I want a new. I either want a new Hyrule or I want a new Kingdom. I don't want the same Hyrule. They've done the whole purpose of Breath of the Wild is because they wanted to do more with this Hyrule, and they did more with the sky, with the underground and the depths, the caves, the new interactivity with the arm abilities. Some people are like, oh, give us a flooded version of this Hyrule and make it Wind Waker, and I'm like, no, I sure, but just give us a new world. I want to see a new world. I think that would be really cool.
Cool.
But yeah.
I mean, I don't think they're gonna. The ending of the game felt very definitive to me. I was hopeful for DLC, but then I played it and finished, and I was like, oh nah, this is it. This is a cap.
I did hope for. I wished for DLC because I wanted some more additional lore on some aspects of the game, like the dragons, the Zonai, Rauru and Sonia, just a lot of Zonai things I just wish we knew a little more about.
I'm okay.
And I think DLC could have given us a bit more of that.
Yeah. I'm okay with how they sort of left off Rauru and Sonia. I know people have questions about their legacy. So I mean there is something to that. I'm almost more curious about the history of the Zonai.
Yes.
I think that's still shrouded in mystery, which perhaps is fitting because Zonai means mystery, right? So, maybe Nintendo felt that they should just leave some things for us to debate for years to come. And that may be it. But to kind of get to the answer to your question, I don't expect them to make another Zelda that follows these characters. Even though I'll say that I've fallen in love. I think this is my favorite iteration of Link. This is my favorite iteration of Princess Zelda, and I think this is the strongest cast. Especially if you did get to the post game cutscene. Every time I watch that post game cutscene, it definitely fills me with goosebumps. Right, Zelda's I'm going she says something to the effect of that. I'm going to work to maintain eternal peace in Hyrule. It goes beyond just Ganon, and I have all of you, right, and Link and the sages all together. It's like a happy camaraderie, right? And so it's you could think of it as for eternity they're going to work together to maintain peace. That's an interesting way to think about it. So I will miss them, and I'm not saying we can't see them again. Maybe you're right. Maybe there is an Age of Calamity, not Age of Calamity, but a Hyrule Warriors Imprisoning War. So maybe we do see the characters then. Maybe if with the supposed Zelda movie, they kind of follow these characters, right? Maybe they're the ones they choose. They are the most popular versions of Link and Zelda, so maybe they're based off that, right? Maybe we do see them in some way. Or maybe they still use them, but it is separate. It is in a different world for the next game. But what I think is the most likely outcome is the next Zelda game. We are just going to have a clean cut. It's kind of why I kind of doubt the Warriors Imprisoning War thing, because I feel for Switch 2, they're just moving past the Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom era. That's all Switch 2, Switch 1 stuff, right? The next Zelda, it's gonna be a whole new generation for Zelda. It's gonna have a different art style. Typically, that's what they do. Usually, they use a new art style, and they're gonna try something different. They have much more powerful hardware. It's gonna be a different direction. It's still gonna be open air, but I think it's gonna be something new. And I'm personally pulling for not even in Hyrule. Or if it is a Hyrule, this version of Hyrule is so vastly different. It's either so far into the future, past, or maybe parallel universe where it's just different. I've almost kind of wanted maybe they should just do it on a different planet. I want something very, very different, and I don't know what exactly they're gonna do.
We never thought that we'd see Sheikah Tech in the way that we did.
Oh,
in Zelda
don't get me started on the
games.
aliens, man. There's aliens in Breath of the Kingdom. Yeah. I mean, what are the Zonai?
Yeah.
They descended from the heavens. What are the heavens? So, anyway, I think we should expect a clean break and they're move on to something very new. And I also think that, you know, especially after Tears of the Kingdom, like it is a criticism of Tears of the Kingdom that it feels a lot like Breath of the Wild. I do think to some extent the similarity takes away some of the excitement for some people, not everyone. And I think Nintendo is going to be ready to just start anew.
Yeah,
I think so too. I hope so, at least.
I mean, Andres kind of already gave his answer, but that was like my final point is like, where does Zelda go from here? Because you have these two massively successful games. How do you translate that to like another game down the line that is not related? Because you could argue Tears of the Kingdom got a really big bump because Breath of the Wild was so popular. So how do you translate the popularity from those two games into another game? I think it was Aonuma said in an interview that Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom is kind of the new format or like the new formula, kind of how Ocarina of Time was for a long time up until Breath of the Wild. Me personally, I would love to see Tears of the Kingdom was definitely an improvement in how you tell the story. You have the open world. I would love to see them continue to move the dial closer to a more linear story while keeping that open world. And I think they could go in a very similar direction to like Xenoblade, where you have that really great linear story, but you can still openly explore the environments around you if you want to grind levels or you want to just explore. Like, I think somewhere in between Tears of the Kingdom and Xenoblade is where the next Zelda game should be. I want to
speak on that a bit. Yeah, I want to speak on that because I love Tears of the Kingdom. I really love the game. It's great. But for me personally, I still, as a whole video game experience, I prefer Xenoblade Chronicles 3. And the reason is because the story presentation is better for me. The music is better for me. And I think it's the big thing is the story presentation. Because Tears of the Kingdom did that whole like non-linearity thing, but it was a little more convoluted this time, like how I talked about earlier. And I think I think Andres was saying like it's tough to do a non-linear game and have that linear story. The numbered Xenoblade games didn't do that because it's more of a linear game. They're more linear games with open areas to explore. Xenoblade X is an open world game with a sequential linear story, even though it's not as like deep and heavy as the other numbered Xenoblade games. It did it. It did a linear story with an open world, and like I'm playing the game right now and I still haven't beaten it, and majority of my time playing the game is not doing the main story. I am like maybe like, this sounds crazy, but like less than 20% of my experience with that game has been main story quests. And Zelda can do that, and Zelda should do that, and I wanted that with Tears of the Kingdom, and I didn't really get it. So I hope that's what they do with the next game. I hope they focus more on continuity. I hope they focus more on the narrative and just give us more of that grand Skyward Sword Twilight Princess story in a massive open world. And have some non-linearity, like do what Link Between Worlds did, where like you can do some dungeons out of order and out of like just not in a straight sequence, but when certain parts of the story happen, give us like big moments. Give us big moments that like everyone will see after doing certain parts of the game. Right. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think they like I think it was on Nintendo Prime's podcast once I mentioned like the Zelda team should take inspiration from Xenoblade, and I still think that. I really think they should, especially with the narrative, with the story, with a lot of that. They should really take notes, because before I played Xenoblade, Zelda was my like go-to Nintendo video game story, and only after like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, I hear people being like, oh, Nintendo games don't really have that much of a story, oh no, and I'm like, but they do. Like Zelda games have great stories, like Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, Wind Waker, amazing stories. Even Fire Emblem has amazing stories. Xenoblade, I think, is the best storytelling of any video game in Nintendo's catalog. So I think with the less emphasis of story that the open world Switch era Zelda games have, I think if they want to bring back that kind of grandiose like accomplishment with the storytelling, I don't know how else to describe it, but like I think they need to really look into what works in the Xenoblade games and bring that over into Zelda.
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's
That was
funny.
a very long spiel.
I think I'm not saying you're wrong. I just think it's funny because like I've used Xenoblade a lot as like an example for what Pokemon should do for their games. So I mean, it's just kind of like basically everyone just needs to copy Xenoblade because
I've given up on Pokemon. I've given up. I don't think. I don't know. But like,
I mean, at the same time,
the
like
thing is,
Xenoblade like is an RPG, right? Like Zelda is. It's more it's all about the adventure, the exploration, the puzzle solving, the combat. Like there's all these like Xenoblade. It's just their gameplay is very different, you know.
Yeah, but the story. That's what I'm saying. The storytelling can be.
I'm not saying
use it as inspiration.
I'm not disagree. I don't disagree with you. I'm not trying to disagree with you. But what I was actually going to say is that you kind of mentioned how like with Xenoblade X, kind of get lost in the world, right?
Yeah.
Something that's interesting is that they included the side adventures in Tears of the Kingdom, which I think is an interesting kind of direction for them because they're my favorite quests and they're more story-based.
They're very well done.
Like I would love another Zelda game where they kind of focus more on that. There's more side adventures, and the side adventures are longer. Like some of them do last a while, like when you're going to do the different fights and things like that, or like pens sort of thing. Like there's some stuff that has layers to it. I want them to build on that, right? Which is very Elder Scrolls like, because they have the Elder Scrolls series have a lot of like different side quests that can branch off and become their own significant quests. Like I think that is a good direction for Zelda because it does is it actually fits better into the open world structure of the game.
Yeah.
So I think they should build on that. In terms of the main story, like. I think they're headed in the right direction. You know, like I think from Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, they made some significant strides. I think they have something good. I think they should build on it. I mean, maybe just kind of focus a little bit more on the details, which I think is what most people are kind of annoyed with. It's just kind of like the details of like how things kind of fit together. The 4 different imprisoning wars retold. Like spruce up the details a little bit. And give us more side adventures that go on they become a little bit more extensive, so we can get more lost into the world. I think that's a good direction for the story for the future. World related quests and character related quests. I think those will make for like cause permanent shifts in the world too. Yeah. Like that's interesting.
Yeah, that's what Xenoblade does. Like with X, you have the affinity quests. With 2 and 3, you have the blade quests and the hero quests. And like learning more about like characters in a Zelda game. Like of course you had Pen, you had other like side adventures related to other characters. But if they're more like tied to the actual narrative of the game, I think that would be nice as well. Yeah.
Well, if you guys don't have anything else to add, I will give each of you a platform to share your channel, what you do, any exciting video projects coming up, and we'll use that to kind of close out. So, Andres, I'll let you go first, and then we can work our way around.
Sure. So, in general, I make Nintendo videos every day. Today, there might be a break. It kind of depends. I'm working on a Zelda video. It's actually very much related to some of the things we talked about today. If it doesn't come out today, I imagine it'll come out tomorrow. By the time this podcast is out, it'll probably already be published.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. But yeah, I'm working on that. It's Nintendo news and theories every day. That's what I do. And my name is AndresRestart.
Epic. Go for it.
Oh yeah, so I'm NishquikPops. You can find me on NishquikPops on YouTube. I talk about Nintendo and RPGs. I haven't been talking about as much Nintendo stuff as of late because there's a lot of JRPG stuff going on, Persona 3 Reload, and like the Nintendo Direct was good. I enjoyed the Nintendo Direct, but I have to say I enjoyed the Sony State of Play a lot more. and that I never thought I would say that because I want to also talk about games like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Tales of Arise DLC, all that stuff. So if you enjoy Nintendo and RPGs, and Nintendo RPGs like Xenoblade, which I talked about a lot on this podcast, you should check out my channel. And yeah, I talk a lot about that stuff. And I'm gonna try making some more YouTube shorts because I figured out how to like properly edit them, and I think it's a lot more fun now that I know how to edit them. So look out for those as well.
Yeah, well, guys, you can check out all of their stuff. Links will be in the description down below. I want to thank both of you for coming on to talk The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. And to the listener, you've made it all the way in this episode. I'm just going to address the obvious. My camera has changed like twice. We went from my super nice camera to my not so great webcam, and all kinds of stuff is lagging. That's because Jackson usually records the screen and not me. So I just wanted to point that out at the very end and acknowledge that I know it's an issue and it should not be in the future because I'm getting a new computer soon. So with all that being said, if you want to stay up to date with the podcast, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter with the links in the description. Now, if you like what we do and you want to support the show, you can check out our merch or join our Patreon and get exclusive benefits, including a monthly bonus episode and behind-the-scenes content, which, by the way, episode 2 of the Nerdiest After Show is now on the Patreon. You can go listen to it. I don't know what Jackson and I talk about because we're recording it today and I don't know yet, but you can go listen to it now with the link in the description. And I want to thank, as always, Bearded Mana for being part of the Nerdiest Max tier. Now, if you're tight on cash, as we all tend to be sometimes, the best way to support us is by leaving a 5-star review and sharing the show with a fellow nerd or someone you think would enjoy listening to us talk about The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. So, thank you to my guests for being here. Thank you to the listener for listening all the way to the end of this episode, and I will see you guys next time. Peace out.
Later, guys.